Hello and welcome to the channel Binpipe School. I am Bijayalakshmi and I am going to teach about the life processes, and in this section of the chapter life process I will be telling you about the characteristics of living being. Now before we begin the characteristics of living being, let's first understand what a living being is, or what makes a living being living. Like when we say a thing is living, that means it is having life. Now this life in Sanskrit, as it is called as prana, that means there is a life force in it. That particular force that makes a thing to be called as living. Compared to non-living things, as we say, that means they do not contain that particular life force. So when something is having life in it or something is alive, we call it as a living thing. So all plants and animals are said to be living. Now next the question arises that when they are living, that means they will have some specific characteristics. Now the first characteristics of living being is movement. When we talk about movement, that means an organism is able to move, or it can change its position without any external help, as I said. So movement in most of the animals, we find it fast, and it can be easily observed that they are changing their position or they are locomoting. Whereas movement in plants is noticed very minutely. Like for example, if we take an example of sunflower, they move according to the direction. They move towards the sunlight. So we can find a sunflower facing towards the sun. So that is how they show their movement. Similarly, mimosa plant, if you touch them, they respond. So that is also a mark of movement. So in that way, animals and plants show their movement. Animals can move from one place to another, or they can locomote, while plants show their movement in a different way. Now all living things are made up of small living units. They are called as cells. Now the cells are still made up of smaller particles called as molecules. Now here in the molecular level, if you discuss, that the movement is observed in a very small scale. So it's very difficult to judge the movement in the naked eye. So in that case, movement does occur, but that is very precise, you can say. Now next, let us discuss about the growth. All living things show growth. That means they develop from the small being to a larger being. That they show growth, development, and even differentiation in the cellular level. Next is next point of discussion is the need of food, air, and water. All living things need these three things for their existence. Without these three things, they cannot exist in the nature. Like these are the source of energy. Okay, and all living things respond to stimulus. Now stimulus is the external change. Okay, the external change that occurs in the surrounding is called as the stimuli. So all the living things have the ability to show the change towards the stimulus. So in some way or the other, mimosa plant, you would find that they show their they close their leaf once it is touched. That means they are responding to the external stimulus. It's a sensitive plant, so they fold up while you touch it with the fingers. Now the next point of or characteristics of living beings are living beings have definite lifespan. That means all living things they take birth, they stay for a certain period of time, and then they die. So that particular point is called as the lifespan. So the time between the birth and the death is the lifespan. So each and every living being have a definite lifespan. So a definite lifespan is one of the important characteristics of living being, means they are mortal. Nobody is immortal. Now the next point is respire. All living things have to respire to release energy. If they don't respire, the energy release is never going to take place. So all living things have the ability to respire, to release energy from the food they take. The next point of discussion will be excretion, or all living things have the ability to excrete or throw out waste. They throw out waste, toxic wastes from their body in order to continue their function. So all living things have the ability to excrete. Next one is ability to self repair, is one of the characteristics. So they can regenerate themselves, they can repair worn out tissues and again proceed in and evolve. Okay, so they have the unique ability to self repair. And the last point that we are going to discuss is all living things have the ability to reproduce, or all living things do reproduce in order to continue their life generation on the earth, or in order to continue their existence. So reproduction is one of the important ability, or they have an ability to multiply, to produce offspring of their own kind. So this is one of the unique property of living beings. So looking at these properties, we can easily differentiate living beings from the non-living beings. So if the question is been asked about the characteristics of living beings, we can answer all these characteristics. And apart from that, if you are being asked to compare between living and non-living things, then you can compare it. When living beings show movement, non-living beings do not show movement. Growth is observed in the living beings, whereas it's not at all observed in the non-living beings. If at all it is observed, the growth is external, whereas in living being the growth is internal. Similarly, all living beings need food, they need air, water, whereas non-living things do not. Living things respond to stimulus, they have definite lifespan, whereas non-living things do not. Living things respire, they release energy, whereas non-living things do not do it. Living beings excrete or throw out waste, whereas non-living things do not do. Living beings have ability to self-repair, whereas non-living things do not have that ability. Living beings reproduce or multiply to produce offspring, whereas non-living things do not. I hope you can answer the differentiation between living and non-living things. See you in the next video about life processes. Till then, stay connected.